Hi there, in this video, I'm making a strange creature hatching from an egg in a wet forest. Let's make it together. The main idea for this creature is a mix between a caterpillar body and a cat head with big bulging eyes. So I'm starting by building a strong base using aluminum foil and wire. Once I had a solid base, I started adding clay and shaping the head of the model. Like we talked about at the beginning of the video, the idea is to give it a cat-like head with big eyes. So first, I made the eyeballs separately using two small clay balls. Then I placed them right into the spots I had planned out earlier. Next, I worked on the eyelids by adding small pieces of clay around the eyeballs. I used my fingertips to smooth out the extra clay, and for the spots that were too tight to reach with my fingers, I used a little tool I made myself from a guitar string and a small stick. I'm not sure what it's called where you are, but where I'm from, we call it a spring scraper. The nose and mouth were the parts that took me the most time to get right. I spent about 4 hours just working on that area until I was happy with it. You might wonder why it took so long. Well, I think this is the most important part of the face, since it shows the character's expression. That's why I really took my time to find the right look for this creature. Next up is the soul of any cat, the ears. I based the ears on the legendary cat Bingus. I actually made them separately ahead of time, so now I just need to place and secure them onto the head. This step takes a lot of precision, because if the ears end up crooked or uneven, you might have to start all over again. Since this is an alien creature, we can't forget the 2 signature antennae growing from its head. For these, I wanted them to look transparent to make them stand out from the rest of the model, so I used translucent clay from Sculpey. I shaped them separately as usual and attached them to the spots I had marked earlier. This part took quite a bit of time because the antennae are thin and fragile, so I had to be extra careful while fixing them in place. And here it is, the finished head. Not too bad, right? After finishing the head, I moved on to the body of the creature. Just like with the head, I started adding clay to areas like the back, tail, and belly. As you can see, I apply the clay in small sections. This helps me control how much clay I'm using and saves a lot of time since I don't have to trim off the extra later. It's a simple trick that's really helpful, especially if you're new to working with clay. Once I had enough clay on, I started blending the sections together. At this stage, you don't need to blend everything perfectly, just make sure there are no big gaps between the pieces. Then I began shaping the folds of the skin and muscles around the neck and leg joints. This step is super important for making the character look like it's really moving, and it helps tell the story through the pose. For this part, it really helps to study animal anatomy carefully. Next, I started working on the thighs of the creature. I added two medium-sized chunks of clay to both sides and began smoothing them out using a round-tip tool. I roll it back and forth until I got a nice, natural curve for the thighs. Just like with the body, I blended the edges where the thighs connect by pulling the clay downward and smoothing it out with a tool. One tip here, try blending from different angles to make it look as natural as possible. Then I used the spring scraper to smooth out any bumps or uneven spots. This tool is honestly amazing for flattening surfaces, and I think it's a must-have in any sculpting kit. And that's it, the main body of the creature is now done. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching up to this point. Now, let's move on to the next step, creating the legs for our creature. I made the legs separately because it's easier to control the size and shape that way. I cut the clay into 3 small pieces and joined them together, then smoothed out the seams and sharpened the tips to make the claws look more like those of an alien insect. Once I finished sculpting the legs, I started attaching them to the body. I had already marked the leg positions on the body earlier, so it was super easy to place them right where they needed to go. Before baking the clay, I worked on smoothing out the surface of the creature using my hands and some small rolling tools. This step helps the model come out cleaner and smoother after baking. Once that was done, I baked the sculpture in the oven for about 40 minutes. While waiting, I started working on the egg. At first, I only planned to make the creature by itself, but I wasn't completely satisfied, so I came up with the idea to also make an egg and place the creature inside, like it's just hatched from it. I started by tightly rolling up some aluminum foil into a ball to use as the core of the egg. If you don't pack it tightly, the core can fall apart easily, so I used a small stick to tap and press it until it felt solid enough. Then I rolled out thin sheets of clay and wrapped them around the foil core. At first, the surface of the egg was a bit uneven, so I used a stick to gently roll over it and smooth it out. Once everything looked good, I baked the egg in the oven just like I did with the main character. After baking, this is what the egg looked like. You'll notice the surface still wasn't perfectly smooth, so I sanded it down using sandpaper. I wrapped the sandpaper around a stick and started sanding. After getting it smooth enough, I marked out where I wanted to add cracks and breaks on the egg using a pen, then I carefully cut along those lines. This part was tricky because the clay was really stuck to the foil inside. So I used a flat edge tool to pry it open and remove all the foil from the inside. Once that was done, the egg looked like this. Now we've got everything we need for the full character, so let's move on to the most exciting part. Now it's time to paint the model. This is my favorite part. I use an airbrush for the base colors and a regular brush for the details. First, I mix the paint. My main character has a bright pink, almost magenta color, so I add a few drops of pink paint into the airbrush cup and stir it well. Always test your paint before spraying it on the model here. I tested it on my skin. Once the paint looked good, I started spraying the model. For the first coat, I always start with the darkest shade and then layer on lighter colors. This is the painting method I usually use for my models. If you have a better way to paint, feel free to share it in the comments. I'd love to hear it. I rotate the model from different angles to make sure the paint covers evenly, and I add highlights and color shifts in certain areas to give it a more natural and lifelike look. I painted the eggshells the same way as the main model. Once that was done, I moved on to painting the eyes, one of the most important parts, because the eyes are the window to the soul. For this step, I used a brush to hand paint the details. I prepped a small wet palette to keep the paint from drying out too quickly. Then I added a few drops of white and black paint. Those are the two main colors I'll be using for the eyes. I started by carefully painting the whites of the eyes. You really need to focus here. If your hand slips, it could ruin the whole thing. Once I was happy with the whites, I mixed a bit of black into the white to get a gray tone and added a small gray area to each eye. This helps create a nice transition for the pupil. Make sure to look from different angles to keep the eyes balanced. Then I painted a solid black circle over the gray to form the pupils, and just like that, the character already started looking way more alive. To make the eyes pop even more, I added a few small white highlights on the pupils. This gives them a glossy look, like they're reflecting light, and that little touch really brings the whole thing to life. After I finished painting the eyes, I added a glossy coat using UV resin. This type of resin hardens when exposed to UV light, and it makes the eyes look shiny, like there's a layer of moisture sitting on them. Once everything was done, I placed the character into the eggshell, and here's how it looks. To make it feel more like the creature just hatched from the egg, I mixed a few drops of green pigment into some UV resin and brushed it around the inside of the shell and onto the creature's body. That way, it looks like there's some kind of slimy green fluid still clinging to its skin, and here it is, our finished creation. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, I wanted to place this creature in a forest setting. And you might be thinking I'm going to build a forest diorama just like many other YouTubers have done before. But actually, I'm not doing it that way. Personally, I'm someone who really loves nature. I want to bring real nature into my living space. A forest is something alive, it is nature, so why try to fake it? And I have a little message for you. Try to stay close to nature, don't push it away. Nature is our friend, not our enemy. Thanks for listening to my little story. Now, let's get back to the project. Right now, I'm holding a small glass tank. It's not very big and it has a little door that opens. I actually found it by accident in my storage room. And after finishing the creature, I thought maybe it'll fit perfectly in here. First, to be able to grow plants inside this tank, we need a base layer of soil. I poured in just enough substrate and spread it out evenly across the bottom. Next, I got a few small plants from a local plant shop. I picked ones that are tiny and easy to care for. I also grabbed some moss to make a grass-like surface and a few small rocks for decoration. Now it's time for that moment when we become real gardeners. I started planting inside the glass tank. The plant shop owner gave me a tip to keep a bit of soil around the roots when taking the plants out of their pots. It helps the plants settle in better, so I followed his advice. And now there's dirt all over my desk. I planted each small plant one by one, mixing different types together to make it look more natural. It's still looking a bit sparse, but I'll definitely add more in future projects, so stay tuned for the next videos. After planting everything, I covered the soil with moss, and it looked amazing once it was all greened up. At first, I was going to decorate with a few small rocks, but then I changed my mind and added a little piece of wood instead. It actually looks pretty good, right? And finally, the last step of this whole project, placing our main character inside the tank. It turned out to be a bit too big for the space. But hey, I still managed to fit it in. Now let's take one last look at our finished piece. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a like and subscribe. Wishing you a great day.